Hey, it's James, Father's Rights and Resources, hashtag how I got custody. Let's talk about Troxel versus Granville, the United States Supreme Court case. I have it linked in my bio. I'm going to put it, this is the citation for it. When you cite a case, just like when you look for a book in the law library, I'll give you a little quickie thing on citations and case law in general. When you look up a book in the library, in any kind of public library, they have the Dewey Decimal System. You go look up the numbering system, and you find it on the spine. Well, everything that you need to find, if you're doing a book report in high school and you have to cite a journal, there's official citation for that. Or a newspaper or a magazine, you say the name, Time Magazine, volume whatever, and in parentheses it's the issue number and the page number. There's official citations so that people can find stuff that you're talking about, or that you cite, so they can go look it up themselves. Okay, so the place where they report case law is in law libraries and in the books called the reporters. They're reporting court cases. So I'm going to put Troxel versus Granville. I'm going off my head, I think it's 530 US 57. Whatever this first number is over here, Troxel versus Granville, you have the name of the case, and then which library is it in. It says U.S. for U.S. Supreme Court Law Library. So you go travel to Washington, D.C. and look at the U.S. Supreme Court Law Library. Or if they have a set of the U.S. Supreme Court case law books in your law library, or at the university of whatever law school in your area, they'll have a shelf of books with these reporters. Well, how do you find it? You go look at the ones that are marked U.S. or have the code U.S. for U.S. Supreme Court. In Washington State, our Supreme Court says W.N. second, W.N. period 2D, Win second. That's the abbreviation for the Washington Second Appellate Court, which is after the Court of Appeals. If it's appeals court, it'll say Win App. There's some states that, I'm trying to think if I remember off the top of my head, like some states, like, let's say, I'm probably wrong about this, but Texas might just say TX third, like it's the third appellate court in Texas or the fourth appellate court in Texas. And then Texas Supreme Court might just say Texas, or it might say Tex Sup, okay? So up here it says U.S. So that tells you what section of the law library you're looking for this case. Then when you look for a book, do you look for the page number first, or do you have to find the book? You have to find the book before you can look at the page number. So the first number is the book volume that you see it in, and then wrapped around what section of the law library, the U.S. Supreme Court reporters, is the page number you started off. So if I'm right, and it says 530 U.S. 57, whatever the number is here and the number over there, there's the book volume, and then when you open up that book on page 57 or whatever, that's when they start talking about Troxel versus Granville. But you really don't have to worry about that technically nowadays. That's just the official place that it's written because everything's online. Up until about 10 years ago, people would go to the law library often. And then less and less as the internet blew up, probably 15 years ago. So that being said, that's a citation. Now there's a second, you'll see a comma, and there's a second set of numbers for another place where it's listed, and a third set of numbers sometimes for Supreme Court cases. But if you're in your own state, like in Washington State, let's say Troxel versus Granville actually came out of Washington. So you'll see Troxel versus Granville in the Washington Appellate Court, unless they bypass that. So you'll see Troxel versus Granville, let's say 100, Win App 200. That means in the 100th volume book of the Washington Appellate, open up page 200, there's Troxel versus Granville. Then the Supreme Court case, Troxel versus Granville, in Washington State, would say Troxel versus Granville, 457, Win second. And it used to be Win second because before the Court of Appeals, it was the second court, I think. I remember it and start remembering it. And Win App is Washington Appellate, so that's easier to remember. But Win second, it's the second appellate court in my mind. I have my own little idiosyncrasies of how to remember stuff. So let's say Troxel versus Granville, 874, Win second, 333, comma, and then it'll have another section that'll say P first or P second or P third. That's the Pacific Reporter, because each section of the country has a regional law library. So this is just to get you to pick. You don't have to memorize this part. It's just to get you to picture a little bit about case law and give you some free game on what those numbers mean. When you see case law cited, everybody knows there's a bunch of numbers and mumble jumble after it, and you don't know what it is. Well, there's the name of the case, there's where it's found in your law library, in your state, in your area, and then the second set of numbers, let's say 454 P second 100, that's the Pacific Reporter Law Library, where they report on Alaska, Hawaii, Washington, Oregon, California. I don't know if they do Nevada or whatever. There's a Pacific Regional Reporter. There's a Southeast Reporter. There's a New England Reporter. There's a Midwest Reporter. Why they have a regional library that has accumulation of different reports, I don't know. They just do. So you have the name of the case, where it's found in, for example, Washington, win app or win second. And then it's also in the Pacific Reporter for dorks who want to go and hang out at the Pacific Reporter Library in Denver or Nevada or Sacramento or wherever it is. I don't even know where it is. And then there's the year. So you have the name of the case, your local law library, the book number, page number, the Pacific Reporter. Now, in the Pacific Reporter, when they go up to 999, they don't want to do 1,000. I don't know why they wouldn't. So then they start a whole new series. So they have the Pacific Second Reporter, and that starts at maybe 100, 101, 102. And then now they're on a third series. I don't know if they've been to a fourth yet, but I see P second, P third, and case law I look at. So let's say you have 100, P third, 145. That means you go down the roll. The Pacific Reporter, the original set of volumes from like the early 1900s. Then there's another set from, the 50s to the 2000s, and now since the 2000s, now they have a third series of the Pacific Reporter because they don't like to go past 999. They want to start all over with a set of numbers. And then you have the year. And then just a little extra when you see, like, let's say this Troxel versus Granville. Let's say somebody's quoting something from Troxel versus Granville, and then they put a comma after 57 and they put 59 or 61. That's the exact page number in there that you see the quote right before. So if somebody's writing a paragraph about Troxel versus Granville, and they said Troxel versus Granville says, we presume this and that, Troxel 570 US 57, 64. That quote that was just right before the citation, you find that exact quote on page 64. So they give you a shortcut to go right to that page when you open up the book. Hopefully that makes sense to people. Sometimes once you cite a case, if you bring it up again later on, you could just say Troxel at 59, or Troxel itself, or Troxel at 77, or whatever page number. So that's a little bit about citations. Now, the biggest thing about Troxel versus Granville is the nature of the case was a mom had kids, the dad died, the grandparents on the dad's side wanted to see their kids, and maybe the mom was being a psycho witch, I don't know. But they got some grandparent rights in Washington Supreme Court. So they appealed to the United States Supreme Court. So wait a minute, all the case law all throughout the 1900s for a whole century said the parents have rights. And so what Troxel versus Granville said, you know what, you're right. We can't keep giving rights to grandparents and uncles and cousins. There'd be 50 different people with visitation each month, which is a great point, even though the mother might have been a witch. So what they did was they reiterated case law. Number one, they said parents have autonomy with their children in the raising and the rearing and decision-making of their children. Autonomy. Auto, M-Y. Autonomy. Like the word auto and M-Y. Autonomy. Autonomy. Oops, I'm sorry. Auto, N-O-M-Y. Autonomy. Autonomy. That means you have freedom without government interference. You have autonomy to sit in your home without cops coming in there, because what do they need to come into your home? A warrant. You have autonomy in your home, freedom from government interference. You have autonomy in raising your kids. It comes from the Liberty Clause of the 14th Amendment. You can look that up later. But it'll lay it out in Troxel. You should read all of Troxel. If you get stuck on a word and don't know what it means, look it up in a dictionary, just keep going. You'll get the main grasp of the main points. But so you have autonomy with your kids, and it says that we assume that fit parents act in the best interest of children, and you don't have to prove this assumption. When you're in criminal court, you're assumed to be innocent until proven guilty. You don't have to prove your innocence. So it doesn't say that every parent is fit, but it says when you're found to be fit or when you're not found to be unfit, we assume you act in the best interest of children. So if you're a dad, they say, oh, you can't handle an infant. You tell a judge, under the Supreme Court, you have to assume I act in the best interest of my child, and I don't have to prove that. That's the summary of Troxel.